was a bright day in October. Short, fitful gusts of wind stirred the light, sun-warmed air, and the pale blue smoke of brush fires rose in thin, hesitant ribbons from fields and gardens, filling the luminous countryside with the sweet, pungent smell of burning green wood and weeds. The village gardens were abloom with full-coloured asters, pale late roses and dahlias. Here and there along the fences, a flagged nasturtium still glowed amid the pale, withered shrubbery. Dr. Mackolt's fly drove slowly along the gentle rising road to Bulach. The grain fields on the left had already been mowed, but the potatoes were still being harvested. On the right there was a narrow strip of young pines, a brown wall of serried trunks and withered branches. The ground was of the same dry brown colour, carpeted with parched pine needles. The road led straight into the tender blue autumn sky, as though the world ended at the top of the rise. The doctor held the reins loosely, letting his old nag go where he pleased. He had just left the deathbed of a woman who, though beyond help, had struggled obstinately for her life to the last. Now he was tired, and the quiet ride through the friendly country lulled him. His thoughts had fallen asleep, absently following the cries that mingled with the smell of the brush fires. He was led to pleasant, blurred memories of autumn holidays from school, and further back to the sounds and shapeless half-light of infancy. For he had grown up in the country, and his senses responded knowingly and gladly to the signs of the season and its occupations. He had almost fallen asleep when his carriage stopped, jolting him awake. A rivulet running across the road held the front wheels in place, for gratefully the horse had stopped and was waiting with lowered head, enjoying the rest. Aroused by the sudden silence, Mackolt took a firm hold on the reins, and smiled to see the woods and the sky sunny and clear after his few minutes of twilight, and with a friendly click of his tongue started the horse off again. And then he pulled himself up straight. He didn't approve of dozing in the daytime and lit a cigar. The nag went on at a slow walk. Two women in broad-brimmed hats called greetings from behind a long row of filled potato sacks. By now, the top of the slope was near. The horse raised his head in expectation, looking forward to the long downhill trot home. Just then, a man appeared on the bright nearby horizon, a wayfarer. For a moment he stood tall and free against the glittering blue, then, descending the slope, he became grey and small. He came closer, a thin man with a small beard, poorly dressed, obviously at home on the road. His gait was weary and painful, but he lifted his hat graciously and said, "Grüß Gott." "Grüß Gott," said Dr. Mackolt, and looked after the stranger when he had passed. Then suddenly he stopped his horse. Rising to his feet and turning back over the creaking carriage top, he called out, "Hey, come over here a minute." The dusty wayfarer stopped and looked back. He smiled faintly, turned away, and seemed about to go on. Then he changed his mind and complied. Now he was standing, hat in hand, beside the fly. "May I ask where you're going?" said Mackolt. "Straight ahead to Berchtoldsegg." "Don't we know each other?" "It's only the name that escapes me. You know me, don't you?" "I'd say you were Dr. Mackolt." "What did I tell you? But what's your name?" "Oh, you must know me, Doctor. We were in Plocher's class together. You used to copy my Latin exercises." Mackolt jumped out and looked the man in the eye. Then he laughed and slapped him on the back. "That's it," he said. "You're the famous Knulp, and we were classmates. Let me shake your hand, old friend. It must be 10 years since we last met. Still on the road?" Still on the road. Man gets set in his ways as he gets older." "Well, that's true, but Where are you heading? Back home again? That's right, I'm going to Gebersau. I have a little something to attend to. Oh, I see. Are any of your people still living? No, there's nobody left. You don't look exactly young anymore, Knope. We're only in our 40s, you and I, and you wanting to pass me by like that. That wasn't nice of you. You know, I think you might need a doctor. Well, there's nothing much wrong with me, and what there is, no doctor can cure. Well, we'll see about that. Just hop in and come along. We can talk better that way. Knope stepped back a little and put his hat on. With a look of embarrassment, he resisted when the doctor tried to help him into the carriage. Oh, what for? He said. Your horse won't run away while we're standing here. But then a fit of coughing came over him, and the doctor, who by then knew what was what, grabbed hold of him without further ado and boosted him into the fly. There, he said, driving on. We'll be at the top in a minute. From then on it's a trot, and we'll be home in half an hour. You don't have to say anything. Now, with your cough, we can talk when we get home. What? No, none of that. The place for sick people is bed, not the road. You helped me often enough in Latin class, and now it's my turn. They drove over the crest, and the brake whistled as they descended the long incline. Down below, one could already see the roofs of Bulak over the fruit trees. Machold held the reins short and kept his eyes on the road, while Knope surrendered quite contentedly to the pleasure of driving and to his friend's dictatorial hospitality. Tomorrow, he thought, or at worst the day after, I'll trundle along to Gebersau if my bones still hold together. He wasn't a young whippersnapper anymore who can afford to squander his days and years. He was a sick old man, and his last remaining wish was to see his hometown again before the end. In Bulak, his friend took him into the big room and gave him bread and ham. Well, they chatted together and slowly recaptured their old intimacy. Only then did the doctor begin his examination, which the patient tolerated good-naturedly with a touch of mockery. Tell me, said Machold when he had finished, do you know what you've got? He said it lightly, without solemnity, and Knope was grateful to him for that. Yes, Machold, I know, it's consumption. And I know I can't last long. Oh, you never can tell. You've just got to get it through your head that you need a bed and care. For the present, you can stay here with me. Later on, I'll find you a place in the nearest hospital. You've got crazy ideas, my boy. You'll have to get some sense into you if you want to pull through. Knope put his jacket on and turned to the doctor with a roguish look on his haggard grey face. Machold, he said good-naturedly, you're going to a lot of trouble on my account. It's kind of you, but it's too late. You mustn't expect too much of me. Well, that remains to be seen. All right, now, you're going to sit in the sun as long as it's shining in the garden. Alina will make up the bed in the guest room. We've got to keep an eye on you, Knope. When a man who's spent his whole life in the sun and fresh air gets lung trouble, of all things, there must be something wrong. With that, he left his friend. Alina, the housekeeper, wasn't pleased. The idea of letting a common tramp into the guest room. But the doctor cut her off short. That'll do, Lena. The man hasn't long to live. Let's just make him comfortable for a little while. He's always been clean, and we'll see that he takes a bath before he goes to bed. Lay one of my nightshirts out for him, and maybe you could give him my winter slippers. And don't forget that he's a friend of mine. Knope had slept 11 hours and dozed away the foggy morning. It was some time before he remembered where he was. When the sun came out, Machold had let him get up, and now, after lunch, they were sitting on the sunny terrace over a glass of red wine. The good meal and his half glass of wine had made Knope lively and talkative. The doctor was taking an hour off from his work to chat with his strange old friend and perhaps learn a thing or two about his extraordinary life. So, all in all, he said with a smile. "You're satisfied with the life you've led. Well, that makes it all right. Otherwise, I'd be tempted to say that you might have made more of yourself. You wouldn't have had to become a pastor or a school teacher. You could have been a naturalist or a poet. I don't know to what extent you've developed your talents or made use of them, but if you have made any use of them, it's been entirely for your own benefit. Or am I wrong?" Propping his chin with its sparse little beard in the hollow of his hand, Knope watched the red reflections playing over the sun-bright tablecloth behind his wineglass. "That's not quite true," he said slowly. "My talents, as you call them, don't amount to much. I'm a pretty good whistler. I can play the accordion, and I make up a little poem now and then. I used to be a good runner, and I wasn't a bad dancer. Well, that's the sum of my talents. But I didn't enjoy them alone. Almost always there were friends about, or young girls or children. My little gifts gave them pleasure, and sometimes they were thankful to me. Why ask for more? Can't we content ourselves with that?" "Yes," said the doctor. "Indeed we can. But I've got one more thing to ask you. You attended Latin school up to the 5th class. Well, I remember that distinctly. And you were a good student, though, not exactly a paragon. And then, one day I find you were gone. I heard that you were at public school, and that was the end of your friendship. In those days, a Latin student simply didn't have a friend in public school. How did it come about? Later on, whenever someone mentioned you, I thought, well, if he'd stayed with us in Latin school, his whole life would have been different. So tell me, what happened? Were you sick of it? Or couldn't your old man keep up the tuition? Or was it something else?" The sick man clasped his glass in his brown, emaciated hand and raised it, but he did not drink. He peered through the wine at the green garden light and carefully set the glass down again, and then he closed his eyes in silence and lost himself in thought. "Do you mind talking about it?" his friend asked. "No, there's no need to." Knope opened his eyes and gave Maccoll a long, searching look. "No," he said, still hesitantly. "I believe there is a need. You see, I've never spoken of those things to anybody. But now maybe someone ought to know. It's only a child's story, but to me it was important. It's plagued me for years. Strange you should bring it up." "Why?" "Well, because it's been on my mind lately, and that's why I'm on my way to Gewährsau." "Why, in that case, tell me about it." "Do you remember, Maccoll? We were good friends then. Anyway, up to the 3rd or 4th class. After that, we saw less of each other. Quite a few times you whistled outside our house and I didn't answer." "By God, that's right! I'd given it a thought for more than 20 years. What a memory you have. Well, go on." "Well, now I can tell you what happened. Girls were to blame. I grew curious about them rather early. At a time when you still believed in the stork and the baby, well, I had a pretty fair idea what boys and girls do together. I couldn't think of anything else. And that's why I stopped playing Indians with you and my other friends." "But you were only 12. Almost 13. I'm a year older than you. Once, when I was sick in bed, a girl cousin came to stay with us. She was 3 or 4 years older than I, and she began to play around with me. When I was well again, I went to her room one night. I found out what a woman looks like. I was scared out of my wits. I ran away. After that, I wouldn't speak to my cousin. I was disgusted and afraid of her. But she'd given me the idea, and all I did after that was to chase after girls. Assis the tanner had 2 daughters my age, and there were other girls from the neighbourhood. We played hide and seek in the dark attics, and we giggled and tickled and did things in secret. Most of the time I was the only boy. Well, now and then, one of the girls let me braid her hair or gave me a kiss. We were all children. We didn't really know what was what, but It all was all very loving, and when the girls went swimming, I hid in the bushes and watched them. Then one day, a new girl turned up. She lived in the outskirts. Her father worked in the knitting mill. Her name was Francisca, and I liked her from the first. The doctor interrupted him. What was her father's name? Maybe I know her. I'm sorry, Macwold, I'd rather not tell you. It has nothing to do with the story, and I wouldn't want anyone to know this about her. Well, anyway, she was bigger and stronger than I. Sometimes we tumbled and wrestled together, and when she squeezed me till it hurt, it made me feel dizzy and half drunk. I fell in love with her. She was 2 years older than I. She kept saying she meant to have a sweetheart soon, and the only thing I wanted in all the world was for her sweetheart to be me. One day, she was sitting by herself in the tanner's garden, down by the river. Her feet were dangling in the water. She'd been bathing, and all she had on was her shift. I went and sat down beside her. Suddenly, I plucked up my courage and told her I wanted to be her sweetheart. But she gave me a pitying look out of her brown eyes and said, "You're only a little boy in short pants. What do you know about loving?" Well, I told her I knew all about it. And if she wouldn't be my sweetheart, I'd throw her in the river and myself with her. Well, that roused her interest. She gave me a woman's look and said, "Let's give it a try. Do you know how to kiss?" "Yes," I said, and gave her a quick kiss on the lips. I thought that was all there was to it. But she grabbed my head and held it tight and kissed me for real, like a woman, until I couldn't see straight. "You'd suit me all right, Sonny. But it can't be done. I can't have a sweetheart that goes to Latin school. They don't turn out real men. I need a real man for my sweetheart, a mechanic or a workman, not a scholar. So it's not possible." But she pulled me up on her lap. She was so firm and warm and good to hold in my arms that I couldn't dream of giving her up. So I promised Francisca that I'd leave Latin school and become a mechanic. She only laughed, but I wouldn't give in, and in the end she kissed me again and promised that once I'd left Latin school, she'd be my sweetheart and I'd be very well off with her. Knope stopped, seized with a fit of coughing. His friend looked at him attentively, and for a time they were both silent. Then Knope went on. "Well, now you know the story. Of course it didn't work quite as I expected. My father boxed my ears when I told him I didn't want to go to Latin school anymore. At first I didn't know what to do. More than once I thought of setting fire to our school. Well, that was childish nonsense, but I was serious about my main idea. Finally, I thought of a way out. I simply stopped being a good student. Don't you remember?" "Yes, it comes back to me now. For a while, you were kept in almost every day." "That's right. I cut classes, I gave wrong answers, I didn't do my homework, I lost my copybooks. Every day I did something wrong, and in the end, I began to enjoy it. I certainly gave the teachers a bad time. By then, I'd really lost interest in Latin and all that. I've always been impulsive, you know. When I had some new enthusiasm, everything else in the world ceased to exist. That's how it had been with gymnastics, and then with trout fishing, and then with botany. And now it was the same way with girls. Until I'd sown my wild oats and had my experience, nothing else mattered. And it is pretty painful to sit in a schoolroom reciting conjugations when all you can really think about is what you saw the other day when the girls were bathing and you were spying on them. Well, there you have it. The teachers may have guessed what was going on. They liked me and shut their eyes as long as possible. My plan would still have failed if I hadn't taken up with Francisca's brother. He was in the last class at public school, and he was no good. I learned a lot from him, and everything I learned was bad. In a few months, I finally got what I wanted. My father gave me the licking of my life, but I'd been expelled from Latin school, and I was in Francisca's brother's class. And the girl? Machold asked. What about her? That was the worst of it. She never did get to be my sweetheart. When her brother started bringing me to their house, she stopped being so nice to me. She treated me as if I'd gone down in the world. After a couple of months at public school, I got into the habit of sneaking out after dark. It was then that I discovered the truth. One night I was roaming around in the park. There were two lovers sitting on a bench, and I stood there, as I did now and then, spying and listening. When I crept closer, I saw it was Francisca and a young mechanic. They took no notice of me. He had his arm around her neck and was holding a cigarette. Her blouse was unbuttoned and, well, it was horrible. All my trouble had been for nothing. Machold patted his friend on the back. Maybe you were better off. But Knoop shook his angular head strenuously. No, certainly not. I'd still give my right hand for it to have turned out differently. Well, don't say a word against Francisca. She wasn't to blame. If it had come out right, my first experience of love would have been a beautiful and happy one. Maybe that would have helped me get used to public school and straighten things out with my father. Because you see, what can I say? Since then, I've had good friends and casual friends and even girlfriends. But I've never really relied on anyone's word, and I've never given my own. Never again. I've lived my life as I saw fit. I've had my share of freedom and good things, but I've always been alone. He picked up his glass, carefully drained the last few drops of wine, and stood up. If you don't mind, I think I'll lie down again. I don't want to talk about it anymore. And you must have things to do. The doctor nodded. Just one word. I'm going to write a letter now to see if I can get you into hospital. The idea may not appeal to you, but there's no other way. You're done for unless you get proper care very soon. Oh, what difference does it make? Cried Knoop with unaccustomed violence. I'm done for in any case. Nothing can help now, you know that yourself. Why should I let myself be shut up? Oh, don't say that, Knoop. Be reasonable. What kind of a doctor would I be if I let you run around loose in your condition? We'll get you a bed in Oberstetten. I'll give you a letter. And next week, I'll come along and see how you're doing. That's a promise. The tramp sank back into his chair. He seemed on the verge of tears and rubbed his hands as if they were cold. Then he turned to the doctor with a look of childlike supplication. Well, he said, if that's how it is, I've a great favour to ask of you. Oh, don't be angry. It's not nice of me. You've done so much. You've even given me red wine. You've been too good. I don't deserve it, but... Machold tapped him reassuringly on the shoulder. Don't be silly, old friend. Nobody's trying to force you. Out with it. You won't be angry? Of course not. Why should I be? Then, Machold, I beg of you, it's a big favour. Don't send me to Oberstetten. If I must go to a hospital, I'd like it to be in Gebersau. There the people know me. I'll be at home. It's probably better for the poor relief too. I was born there, and besides... His eyes begged fervently. He was so agitated he could hardly speak. He's feverish, Machold thought. And he said calmly, Oh, if that's all you want, it's settled. Good idea. I'll write to Gebersau. And now go and lie down. You've been talking too much. He looked after the tramp as he shuffled into the house, and suddenly he remembered the summer when Knoop had taught him how to fish for trout. He thought of the handsome, passionate 12-year-old boy and of his knowing, masterful manner towards his friends.